Somehow, deep down, I always knew I'd kill myself. I never had much to live for. Grew up with no money and no friends, not particularly bright or hardworking enough for scholarships. My family are a bunch of loners and hate mongers, tearing at each other each Thanksgiving like carrion birds flocking to new death. I worked a real shit job on a real shit shift in a real shit part of town. Literally, I was an overnight sanitation worker at the sewage treatment plant. Armed with a hazmat suit and a 40-foot paddle, I pushed shit around all night long to keep the pumps from getting clogged. If one did, I would get lowered down into a giant steaming vat of watery shit to manually unplug whatever horrible excrement monster was gumping up the works. When you get dunked in a vat of shit every day, you begin to only smell shit. Flowers smelled like shit. Food smelled like shit. And of course, I smelled like shit. That suit didn't do as much as you would think to protect me. No amount of showers could wash away the smell. You think I had a lot of friends or girls coming around? But don't feel sorry for me. I earned that life. Deserved it even. It was on one such shit-clogged night that I had to go diving into the swirling mess of my town's buttholes when my decision was made. My partner checked my suit, gave me the okay, and I was lowered down. I immediately knew something was wrong because the smell was much worse. Then I could feel it. The thick, stinky liquid began filling my suit. I tried to signal, but the crane operator wasn't paying attention. And by the time he did notice and lifted me out, the foul brew was almost up to my chin. I tried to keep my lips sealed tight, but the herky-jerky movements of the cable sloshed shit all over my face. Some splashed into my nose and ears, and some got past my lips. I gagged, vomited, more entered. Everyone apologized. My coworkers, my supervisor, the night shift plant manager. I was having none of it. I got into my car, still covered in shit, and floored it out of the compound. With no traffic in sight, I was free to let my '89 Ford Festiva open up full throttle. The car shook and convulsed once we hit 58 miles per hour, but I still forced it further. The front bumper collided with the cement freeway pillar at 71 miles per hour and pushed inward until it met the trunk barrier. In movies, the cars erupt on impact and a massive fireball ensues, but that isn't real life. The car never caught on fire, thank goodness for that. Can you imagine the smell of cooking shit? You may be asking yourself, how the hell does he know all of this? Apparently, you can't commit suicide if you're already dead, drowned in 50,000 gallons of shit water. Somehow, I made it out of my body before it ceased to exist without knowing, fueled by a hatred for the life I had led and tried to end it. Watching your own funeral is quite sobering. It is hard to tell if anyone there is sincere or not, but there were quite a few nice things said about me. It is no matter. I like the body I'm in now. I am strong, tall, and a bit more handsome than I used to be. I am married to a sweet, soft-spoken woman and have 2 children. One is even named after me. The job I have is fine, a bit boring. Sit at a desk, answer calls, and tell a few people what to do. It can get maddening at times, but at least I don't smell shit all day long. The problem is, I'm getting a little bit bored. I never really wanted kids, so they get on my nerves too easily. My wife keeps saying I have changed and has begun pestering me all the time. Oh, and her cooking? Atrocious. I may give this suicide thing another try. Maybe I can bounce into another body that I like better this time. A dash of cumin, a sprig of rosemary, and lastly, a dash of salt and pepper. I muttered to myself, going to the old wooden cupboard to find my pewter salt and pepper shakers. These are the shakers I use to season all of my tasty dishes, from homemade dinner dates to my Blue Apron meals. It had been so long since I had a dinner date, so I was going to enjoy it. I picked up the small shakers within my large hand and rolled them in my palms, awed by the simplicity of the once polished, now aged shakers. I remember when I was young, my grandmother would season everything with these shakers. She said it was like her magic that made everything taste perfect, even though I thought it mainly just made the dish taste salty. but she said she had these ever since she moved out of her parents' house, which meant these shakers had stayed in the same cupboard for at least 80 years. I remember when I was a child, I watched her salt a fresh, juicy slab of meat she had brought up from the meat cellar in the basement. She confided in me, saying, "More salt seals in its juices, you know, and that makes the meat more succulent, tender, and more flavorful." As I grew up, I began to wonder, did this work on just beef? I tested it on pork and happily got the same results. My chicken experiment, however, didn't go so well. To my surprise, the raccoon I shot one night was oh so good. The shakers made it less gamey and so tender it fell off the bone. Hell, even stray cats were fair game, and, well, it turns out with a good enough gun, they don't truly have 9 lives. The meat tasted smoky, but nothing unpalatable, though it stayed a little tough. I cooked a deer with the same results. The shaker's contents made the meat taste great. It was salty with the perfect zing of pepper. I loved using these shakers to season my meals. They were filled with ordinary salt and pepper, but somehow their pewter prison improved their seasoning abilities. Before I was able to get skunk, rat, or any other unusual meats to experiment with, college came. I moved too far away to visit my grandmother, though, and I longed for some meat salted with those magical shakers. Once college was over and I had my diploma, I moved back to my hometown. Sadly, my grandmother passed at the age of 98 years old. It was a sad passing, however. I was thrilled to find out that in her will she left me her house, which meant those glorious salt and pepper shakers were now mine forever. I couldn't wait to try seasoning every meat I could get my hands on. Once I settled into my grandmother's old house, I made sure to get back to experimenting on as many different meats as possible. A few days later, I found myself sitting at the bar flirting with a nice young lady, Veronica. Her hair was long and black, her eyes dark brown. Her tank top delicately hugged her curves, and her backside was so firm I was immediately taken. Before I knew what was happening, I had invited her over to my house for a dinner date. The next night, she arrived at my house with a gorgeous black gown on and a sweet vanilla scent to her. We chatted over wine and cheese as I stared into her dark eyes, smiling as I watched them grow hazy from the drugs I had slipped into her drink. Over the next few days, I made sure to slowly tenderize the meat in the cellar with a few tools I had picked up. Since Veronica was securely attached to the meat hooks, it wasn't like she was going anywhere anytime soon. No need to rush the process. I snapped out of my trance to the smell of caramelizing onions. I was back in my kitchen and had become lost in thought. Thankfully, I came back to the present just in time for my favorite part, the seasoning. I grabbed those beautiful salt and pepper shakers, sprinkling the white and black powders into the dish and letting them sit before slicing off a small chunk of meat for a taste test. It tasted amazing. She tasted amazing. I couldn't believe my luck. Thankfully, the drugs I had slipped into Veronica's drink hadn't affected the flavor at all. Turns out, my grandmother was right. These shakers did make everything taste better. It's a shame that my sweet grandmother couldn't enjoy this meal. I think she would have found Veronica delicious. I want to share some of the creepy things I find being mailed through the U.S. Post Office. And if you think we don't look, yeah, we do. If we have any grounds for suspicion, we can run a package through scanners without even having to fill out a form. Then, if we see something in the X-ray which might contain something illegal or a safety hazard, we're allowed to open it. And yeah, pretty much anything can look illegal if you put your mind to it. But that doesn't stop people from still sending the weirdest shit. They count on the volume of packages being way too high to inspect each one, and usually they're right. Here are a few times they were wrong. A human finger. It still had its wedding ring on. I guess one lady didn't think divorce papers would send a strong enough message, so she sent her whole finger. At least, that's what I'm assuming it meant. Blackmail letters. We got a string of letters headed to the same destination, all without a return address. Inside were pictures of a politician, sorry not saying who, naked in a hotel room with a girl 20 years younger than him. The letters were threatening him if he doesn't cough up. Drugs. You have no idea how many people are using dark web websites to send drugs. If they're packaged right, it's pretty impossible to tell, but others are sloppy. a coffee can full of marijuana, which I could smell from a room away, a syringe full of heroin with a handwritten label reading insulin, cocaine in a sugar bag, you name it. The weirdest thing I've ever found was what came in 2 weeks ago, though, and it's why I'm writing this post now. Real ordinary envelope with red lettering mixed in with a bag of other ordinary letters. I wouldn't have noticed it if I hadn't watched the guy drop it in the box a minute before I collected. He was wearing these old-fashioned monk robes like you'd expect to see in a medieval monastery. I forgot about him until I was unpacking the bag at the office and I saw the red lettering. The address was starting to smear, and there was no mistaking. It was written in fresh blood. If that doesn't count as grounds for suspicion, I don't know what does. I opened it to find a list of 12 names, also written in blood. The first 4 were crossed out. At the bottom of the list, it said, "Give me 6 months for the rest. Destroy the letter and do not tell anyone." I tried Googling the names, and over the last 3 months, all 4 crossed-off names had committed suicide. All the same way, too. A bullet in the temple. I forwarded the information to the police, and they said they would investigate, looking for any connection with the remaining 8 people. There was another letter from him, collected from the same box last week. It was the same list, but this time there were 5 names crossed off. I googled the 5th name and, you guessed it, suicide 2 days ago. Single bullet to the temple. Well, almost the same list. My name was added to the bottom. At the end was written, "I told you not to tell anyone. Do not try to find me." Well, I didn't have to try to find him, because I knew where he was dropping the letters off. If I could just explain to him I wasn't a threat, if I promised not to tell anything more, then maybe he'd take my name off. The police weren't finding anything, and I couldn't think of any other way to protect myself. Yesterday, I waited at the same mailbox he dropped off at. I tried to get the police to wait with me, but they didn't think I had enough sufficient grounds to expect his appearance. Right on schedule, though, same time he dropped the other letters, the cloaked figure was there. He was walking strangely this time, like he could barely move his legs. He was struggling to even lift the letter up to the mailbox. I confronted him and begged him to take my name off the list. I swore I would stay out of his business. I didn't even care if the others died. I just didn't want to be one of them. He stayed quiet, though. The figure seemed to be struggling under his cloak, and then he dropped to his knees in front of me. Why would he be begging from me? Was he afraid I'd turn him in? When he still didn't answer, I pulled the cloak back to reveal his face. His mouth was gagged, and I helped him out of the cloak and found his legs and arms were tied too. No wonder he was having trouble getting the letter in the box. "Who did this to you? What's going on?" I asked him. He opened the letter and crossed out a name. Was that it? Was I off the list? I took a step closer to see, but then he pulled out a handgun, right in the middle of the street. Holy shit! I backed up so fast I fell right on my ass. But he wasn't pointing it at me. He was pointing it at himself. One shot, straight to the temple. He was dead before he hit the ground. You might think I'm an asshole for this, but even before calling the police, I went straight for the letter. All I could think about was whether my name has been taken off. But he hadn't crossed out my name. He'd crossed out the 6th name on the list. I checked it against his driver's license and yeah, same name. It was his time to go. Not only that, but my name had been moved. I'm now number 7, the next one up. Written below the list it said, "I told you not to try and find me." Picture it. Hometown, 2003. I was 25, a year out of college, working my first grown-up job, and had been living alone in my apartment for about 6 months when I arrived home to find my phone ringing. I missed the call, checked the caller ID, and didn't recognize the number. The area code was from my old college town, about an hour away. I went about my business, but within a couple minutes, the same number called again. Unknown caller. "Hey girl, how are you? It's been such a long time." Me. "Hi, who is this?" Unknown caller. "Girl, it's Mandy. What are you up to?" I knew 4 Mandys. None lived college town. None called me girl all the time. None sounded like a valley girl on uppers. Me. "Mandy who?" Mandy. Oh my gosh, we have so much to catch up on. So you've moved back to hometown. That's great. Where are you working? Are you still dating that guy from high school? I so thought y'all would end up together. How are your parents? Where do you live in hometown? What are you up to tonight? Wait. This was a fifth Mandy. Mandy Jones from high school? I mean, we'd been friends when we took dance in elementary school, but we'd long since lost touch. Why in the world would she be calling me now? This didn't feel right. Me. Hey. Yeah, so I'm working at local business in hometown. What are you up to? Mandy. Oh, that's great! I always knew you'd really be somebody. So, where do you live now? And are you still dating that guy from school? That really cute one? Weird. I had one boyfriend in high school. He attended a different school. And we broke up after a couple of months. Hardly a love story for the ages. Me. So, this is Mandy who again? Mandy. Girl, Mandy, come on now. So, and she continues blathering on, asking all kinds of personal questions, which I kept dodging. She kept wanting to know where I lived, answering hometown wasn't enough. And what about the cute guy from school? Me. Okay, look, I don't know who you are, and I have no idea how you got this number. Mandy. Mandy Roper. Girl, I know it's been a while, but you should know that. We played volleyball together. You wrote this number in my yearbook, and I just came across it and thought we should catch up. All the red flags. A few things you should know about Mandy Roper. She sounds less like a chirpy valley girl and more like someone who started smoking a pack a day at age 4. While we did play volleyball and softball and all the other balls together, I guarantee that if you asked her, Mandy would tell me we played basketball together, mostly because, number 3, basketball is the reason Mandy Roper hated my guts. I was one of a handful of freshmen on the varsity team, and within 2 weeks of joining the team, had made an enemy of the scariest bitch on the team. It's a very long, very silly teenage girl drama that isn't relevant to the rest of this tale. Just keep in mind that Mandy would rather have told me to go fuck myself with a rusty spork than have tea in a chat. Anyway, number 4. I'd gotten that phone number when I moved into my apartment 6 months prior, so I couldn't have given it to her in high school. Also, I would have faked my own death before purposely giving that crazy lady my number. So I told Mandy Roper as much. Me. You don't sound like Mandy Roper. I couldn't have given you this number in high school because I've only had it for a couple of months. And Mandy Roper hates me. She is the last person who would ever give a crap about what I'm doing right now. Who is this really? Mandy. Silence. Me. Seriously, who are you? Mandy. Fuck you. Click. Over the next week, maybe 2, I had several hang-ups at my office, and a rose was left on my doorstep that my then-boyfriend denied having left. I was literally clueless about stalking and harassment and whatnot, so I wasn't really sure what to do, and it seemed the hang-ups weren't going to stop. I called a friend who still lived in College Town and asked her cop husband what to do. He took the number and looked it up for me, then called the house. The most he could figure out is that it was a little old lady who lived alone and seemed thoroughly confused by the whole story and swore no one else could have used her phone. My dear, dear friend Mandy must have been someone close to little old lady, though, because all of it stopped after he made that call. It wasn't until years later that I realized why someone chose to pretend to be Mandy Roper. We'd played volleyball together one single year, and it just so happens that we were seated next to one another in the team photo in the yearbook. We were both smiling in that pic. We'd simply gotten used to ignoring each other by then. So, someone somewhere got their hands on an 8-year-old yearbook from someone I went to school with, looked me up, picked the person sitting beside me in a team photo, then called and harassed me for a couple of weeks. I sit here 14 years later, still unclear on who, what, when, where, why, and how, but Mandy Roper, let's not meet. Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. But even if He, in all His glory, finds the power to forgive me, how can I ever forgive myself? I'm often asked how I bear the burden of listening to confessions. People assume my conscience is haunted by the personal demons each man and woman struggles against, but that's not the case. In truth, there's no thrill which compares to hearing a confession. The trust they are putting in me, the trust they are putting in God, is a beautiful moment to behold. They freely submit themselves to my power, begging for my absolution as though it were I who wielded God's wisdom to judge or forgive. But when it comes time to confess my own sins, I found I lacked the courage of my flock. I am more than a man to them. I am a symbol of the divine. To admit my own failings is to weaken their faith that the Lord may shelter them if their belief is true. Or perhaps that's just the excuse I give to protect my pride. All I know is that this demon is too great for me to contain on my own, so I'm writing this to beg the forgiveness of strangers in the hope that I too may find peace again. Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. He came to me like all the others and sat down in the other side of the box. His voice was strange to me, almost like a voicemail compared to a human speaking in person. Speak, and you will be forgiven, my son. I usually go in expecting infidelity. That is the most common curse which gnaws at our hearts with guilty teeth. I have killed a man, a good man, a man of God. The thrill only increases with the magnitude of the sin. I do not know who he is, but he's already telling me something which would allow me to destroy his entire life. I breathe slowly through my nose so as not to let the excitement enter my voice. Why did you do such a thing? He was a murderer himself, and I was afraid he would kill again, he replied. Disappointing. When they have a reasonable excuse for their sin, they do not feel the same desperate need for my approval. I would have preferred he killed someone innocent. To take a life for any reason is a great crime against God, I replied. That seemed like what I was expected to say. Confession is not the time to remind them of how much blood God had demanded over the years. It is not your place to judge them, and it is yours to judge me. There was accusation in that voice. It sounded familiar, but I couldn't quite place it. Did I know this man? Only God may pass judgment for such a sin. Then I won't waste my time with you. I heard his door open and then slam shut like a petulant child going to his room. What an unfulfilling sinner he was. The rush I usually felt was utterly absent. The next week, I heard the same voice on the other side of the box. Forgive me, Father, for I have killed another man. Was he a murderer too? Not yet, but he could have become one, the voice said, infuriatingly familiar. Perhaps he was a relative, or simply one of my regular congregation. All men have the capacity for evil. Does that give you a right to kill anyone? I asked. There was nothing as satisfying as leading them to condemn themselves. Finally, I would hear the real confession I was waiting for. Yes. I could not have prepared myself for that answer. By the time I got home, I knew who he had killed. My father had been choked to death in his house last night. I still remember the first beating he gave me when I was 4 years old. The scars from the lashes on my back have never healed to this day. Lord knows I had thought about ending him myself 100 times, but actually hearing the news was unimaginably painful. The guilt of my own evil thoughts against him was almost enough for me to seek confession myself. But there was no sense dirtying my image when I had resisted my evil temptations. If anything, I was thankful to my father. I would have never joined the congregation if I wasn't trying to get away from him. His cruelty had paved the way for my mercy. I didn't expect the killer to ever return after how closely he struck me. He couldn't have expected my forgiveness after so personal an attack. A month passed, and I had come to terms with my father's death when the voice spoke through the wooden grate again. Forgive me, Father, for I have killed another man. My breath caught short, my fists clenched. How dare he? He never received absolution for either of his previous visits. That's when it occurred to me. He wasn't here for absolution. He was here to taunt me. The death of my father, the manner he composed himself, the blasphemous disregard for my authority, this was all a personal attack. Why did you do such a thing? I forced one word to follow the other. I couldn't slow my breathing this time. I couldn't allow this monster to continue. Because he made a fool of everything I believe in. That was exactly what he was doing. That was proof. He was only here to taunt me. I don't know what I have done to this man to deserve such abuse, but I am still a man with blood pounding in my veins. I was not going to idly take it any longer. Get out of here, I said. Both this church and heaven will be barred to you forever. You're a fraud, the voice said. You don't speak for God. Hell, you probably don't even believe in him. You just get off on the power you feel from pretending. I'm warning you, I was shouting now. Or what? You'll send me to hell? I thought only God could judge me. I was shaking so bad I had to stand to expel some of the extra energy. I killed your father with my bare hands, and all you can do about it is preach something you don't even believe? You're pathetic. That was too far. I flung open my side of the confession booth and raced over to his. I threw the second door open with enough force to tear it from the hinges. As though his insults weren't enough, the man was wearing a rubber mask of Jesus. Take that damn mask off and leave, I shouted. I didn't give him time to respond, though. I was already lunging at him, trying to pull the mask off. He fought back, his hands clasped around my throat. Those hands, the same hands which had choked the life out of my father. It was all a blur after that. I tried to pry them off, but the grip was too strong. It wasn't until I got my own hands around his neck that he began to lose hold. The thrill of confession, the power I held over people, it was nothing like this. There's no power over someone like having their neck in your hands. I finally understood why my father beat me. I never felt closer to the divine than that moment when he convulsed beneath my hands before finally falling limp. Finally. Now I could see who hated me so much that they would go to these extreme lengths to torment me. His cold, dead hands, so alike my own, were helpless to prevent me from pulling back his mask. I stared at my own dead face, vomit coating the sides of my mask, my dead tongue lolling grotesquely from my mouth. That is how I came to terms with who I am. Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. I have killed a man of God. I have killed my father. I have killed the man who made a fool of everything I believe in. And I have never felt more alive.